They say people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. So, what made you leave? I worked in an agency environment, big clients and big expectations, but we had a fairly small staff for all the projects we took on. Late nights were expected, and some nights I barely had any time to eat before I had to sleep to go into work tomorrow. Me and a few others tried to ask for structural change to get some breathing room between projects. We were always ignored by the upper management and my boss. But hey, they get us a pizza after a big project, so we can't complain, right? I was tired, frustrated, and felt like I was just a tool for the man. We worked late and never got anything back from the company, so I sent out applications, found a bigger company with a much cooler culture. They offered me a gigantic pay raise plus better benefits. I went to my boss to hand in my resignation. I gave him my 2 weeks' notice. This is somehow a 30-minute conversation telling me how miserable I'll be at this other company and how good I had it here. I hadn't even mentioned the name of the new company, so I knew he was talking straight lies. I went back to work thinking I had my 2 weeks confirmed. However, my boss then pulls me back into his office and says he's going to let me go today, like right now. Get your things and get out. I did, and I never looked back. My new job is great, by the way. Better boss, better work, better life. Guys, remember when you give notice and they show you out immediately without paying you out the notice, technically you've been terminated and you can file for unemployment. Not that it makes a big difference financially, but the company has to deal with the bureaucracy, plus they have to pay it. If they decide to fight it, it's time, effort, and a huge hassle on them, plus they usually lose and have to pay it anyway. Story 2. I recall being a supervisor at a job where significant bonuses were given to non-management staff for their performance. The issue was that I was so effective in my role that all my direct reports consistently met their targets, earning them a 10% bonus while I received nothing for my exceptional work. Months later, the company relocated an entire department from overseas to our office, citing my contributions as a key factor. I applied for a management position but was turned down. I also applied as a regular employee and was again denied, being labeled as a subpar employee, despite having been named Employee of the Month just weeks prior. When the new department was fully operational, I spoke with someone from that team who mentioned, "I'm surprised you didn't apply for this department. All we do is confirm the work you've submitted over the past year." That was a point when I felt a sense of frustration. Despite the challenges, I continued to perform my duties with pride, especially for my direct reports. My original team members all received promotions, and I was known as a strong leader who could turn around even the most challenging employees. One individual passed training with just 51%, and everyone expected her to be let go quickly. However, after 2 months under my guidance, she became an Employee of the Month. Even when I was awarded Employee of the Month for facilitating the department's relocation to our office, I gave away the $500 gift certificate to a mall for a fundraiser for a new hire in another department whose apartment had caught fire. I was so influential in the new department that I was asked to give a presentation during the training classes, even though I was never officially part of that department. Some employees aspiring to join the department would seek my advice, to which I would jokingly reply, "Don't ask me, it's clear I can't even get in there myself." One person responded, "Don't undermine yourself, you are that department. Everyone here knows that, and it's unfair what they're doing to you." Working the swing shift from 3 to 11 p.m., I often had to participate in early morning conference calls with headquarters at 7 a.m. This meant I would go home, sleep for only 4 hours, drag myself to work for an hour, and then go back home to try and rejuvenate before my regular shift. When the original manager of the department, who had denied me a position within it, was demoted to a regular employee, they had to move him to another department to avoid having me as his supervisor. Despite being the lowest ranking manager, I attended operations meetings and was considered an unofficial third trainer for new employees. I had a legendary record but kept being overlooked for promotions. Due to the bonus structure, I was one of the lowest paid individuals in the department. I was let go after refusing to attend a management seminar organized by the office boss's boyfriend, which was considered a new age hippie-style event. All my unfinished work was sent directly to the CFO. Months later, I received messages from my former colleagues informing me that headquarters had fired the entire upper management team, describing them as the most incompetent group they had ever encountered. Although I hoped to be rehired, the company was planning to close the office within the next 6 months. Story 3. As a nanny, it's weird when your boss is a mom with no actual experience in being a boss. The worst boss I worked for wasn't that bad when I first started working for her. Over the course of the year, she kept adding more things for me to do. I wasn't just taking care of the baby now, I became their maid too with no increase in my salary. Eventually, it got even worse and I was basically her personal assistant. She got a taste of power and completely made use of it. As a teenager, it was hard for me to see how bad the situation was. It wasn't an overnight thing. I was eventually quote unquote fired. Then, the day after I was fired, she called me asking where I was. By that time, the job was so bad, I did everything in that house, from taking care of the baby to hand washing the mom's delicates. She even got me a uniform and would scold me if it wasn't kept well, same with hair and makeup requirements. She was a couple of weeks pregnant with a second baby and suggested I become a nurse for them. After I was fired, I never went back. This lady flipped out and showed up at my house. Yikes, the mom looking for her assistance after firing her? Man, good thing she didn't come back. I mean, what would the mom do then? Double fire her? Story 4. A former colleague and I both applied for a higher level job that had opened up. I had a lot more experience, having done a similar job before. I was more qualified and a better match for the role. Even before the interviews, the higher-ups had already chosen to give the job to my colleague. Nepotism went out and I had to deal with a lot of smugness, but it got worse when they started treating me like a clueless person instead of the experienced professional I am. I decided to leave after about 6 months. I found a much better job with higher pay and better working conditions. I gave the required 90 days notice. My former colleague, who was now my manager, was so caught up in their own work that they didn't even try to fill my position until they suddenly realized I was leaving in just 2 weeks. No one was hired to take my place, and my manager tried to put my responsibilities on one of my team members, who quickly got overwhelmed and quit. The rest of the team left for better jobs elsewhere, and my former boss ended up leaving 6 months later in disgrace. Karma really does come around. Story 5. I've been working at my current job for over a year and a half, and I'm leaving because I've worked really hard for them, but when a big opportunity came up that I had been trained for, I went through 5+ months of training. They gave it to their daughter right away. I also found out that I almost didn't get a raise because my boss thought my behavior was quote-unquote inappropriate. This was all because of small things she could have easily corrected on the spot, like moving a box with my hands instead of using my knees. On top of that, I've been called out in front of all the staff, and we're constantly told that all the workers are replaceable. There have been passive-aggressive comments even during simple requests. Family members get away with things that would get me in trouble, and they've tried to make me quit by giving me less work thinking I'll leave quickly. They also put so much stress on our last floor manager that she quit. They would tell employees that if they don't have symptoms from the disease, they need to come in, even though most of our customers are older people. Being yelled at least once a week really makes employees hate their boss. Story 6. I'm a teacher and I worked at a school in a really tough neighborhood. Most of my students had never left the neighborhood. We had to be aware of which kids were in which groups to avoid sitting them near each other. Disputes happened often and deals were common. They were definitely behavioral issues, but there were also a lot of really good kids who just wanted to go to school. The principal was on a power trip. She was mean to the students, teachers, and parents. My first year there were 4 of us teaching at that grade level. The school year starts in August, and by October, 1 of the 4 was quietly dismissed for inappropriate behavior. By early December, another teacher had an accident on a locker while trying to help break up a fight. That left just 2 of us and a constant rotation of substitutes because the principal wouldn't hire permanent replacements. A lot of the time, a substitute wouldn't show up and the students would be split between the remaining teacher and me. There were over 40 days when I had 45 or more kids in my classroom. I struggled a lot and I got no support from the administration. At my end-of-year evaluation, my principal said I struggled, but that I could have taken more professional development to help. Like, what? Every faculty meeting was filled with everything we were doing wrong. There was never anything positive. The principal took away everything positive. The kids normally had to wear khakis or dockers and polos, but they could wear jeans on Fridays. And the same went for the staff. She stopped that. She stopped pep rallies. She canceled all dances. Anything that could be positive to encourage the kids she didn't take care of. 3 of my students wrote her a letter to ask why she took away the 8th grade dance from everyone, and why she didn't just exclude the kids who caused problems instead of removing it from everyone. They asked me to give her the letter because they were afraid of her. She refused to take it from me and said that they needed to give it to her. I stuck it out for 3 years, but by the end of my 3rd year, I had already decided I was leaving, even though I would miss my students. Then something happened on campus which really solidified my decision to leave. If you're enjoying the video and connecting with any of the stories so far, we've got more to come, so please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 7. A new employee didn't show up for their shift, which really messed us up. They arrived 3 hours late and just stood there, not helping us catch up on work. The other staff member and I stayed late to prepare for the next shift and clean up. We told him to let us know if he needed help and explained that we were on the other side doing our tasks. He completely failed, didn't come to get us, and never returned. Our manager, who is a blockhead, took his side and removed our shifts for 5 weeks, which led me to quit after working there for 8 years. This manager had previously criticized me for trying too hard to be a good employee and got angry when I worked off the clock to help a coworker who was overwhelmed and couldn't keep up. He threw his keys at me, hit the ice machine, and let that poor girl struggle for the rest of the night. This is the same manager who asked employees inappropriate questions. He was the one who was banned from another location for being extremely intoxicated, and he also questioned why another manager would hire a heavy-set woman. Story 8. After working for the same company for 17 years and always getting praise for my work, I finally got a job in a department I had always wanted to be in. My manager was excited to have me and kept praising me. Then one night when I was on call, we received an urgent page that was sent to my phone, but my phone didn't ring. So my manager was called instead. She texted me a few times, but I don't have my texting set to make a loud sound. The next day, she was pretty upset. I apologized for my phone not working properly for the call and explained that if she had tried to call me instead of texting, it probably would have been fine. Plus, my backup coworker got the call and fixed the issue quickly. That's what backups are for, right? But she wouldn't accept my explanation. She kept telling me I had messed up and that it better not happen again. She even suggested I get another phone as a backup. I apologized again, but said, look, what happened could happen to anyone. Mistakes happen, my backup handled it, and it wasn't even super urgent. She wouldn't let it go. The worst part was that she never asked me why I missed the call. Her immediate response before we even talked about it was something like, you missed this important call, so your backup had to fix it, and he shouldn't have had to. You're in trouble. Our relationship went downhill from there. Keep in mind, I had dedicated more than 17 years to this company, was a great employee, and had a lot of respect from my peers and even from her. I would wake up early and stay late to meet our customers' schedules. I worked on my days off for truly urgent issues and never got paid overtime. I didn't mind because I liked the job and was paid well. After a few months, she and I ended up in a meeting with an HR representative who tried to help us reach a truce. The problem was he mostly took her side. He kept bringing up the few times I hadn't performed perfectly, completely missing the context every time. For example, he said, your boss tells me there was an email where you were a bit rude to a customer. Is that true? I tried to explain the situation, but he wouldn't let me. He just wanted a yes or no answer. After dealing with this for a while, I looked at my boss and asked, is any of this going to change with you? She just looked at the HR rep. I said, okay, I guess that's what I thought. Stood up, put my security badge on the table, grabbed my personal bag, which I had packed just in case, and said, I quit. Then I walked out. The funny thing is, the HR rep followed me out saying, we don't want this. I turned around and said, neither did I. I felt so good driving home. Now I have a much better job where I'm appreciated a lot more. Story 9. I could say a lot about a former boss who was brought over from Europe. He would delegate most tasks to me and then take credit for them. We would have meetings and he would constantly interrupt to say that I would fix whatever we were discussing. He denied me the chance to interview for a promotion because he needed me to keep doing half of his job for him, and he accused me of being disloyal. When I gave my notice, I listed several reasons why I was leaving. His response was just a shrug and, okay, if you're going to be like that about it. I gave him a detailed list of instructions on how to perform certain tasks and run reports, but instead of reading it, he gave it to another employee and told them to call me at my new job if they had any questions. A coworker who left around the same time was called in and told, I don't see you being happy or successful at your new job, and that makes me sad because we'll fill your position and you won't be able to come back, but good luck anyway. This boss was later promoted and sent to China as if the company wanted him to mess things up on every continent. The company itself had these initiatives where every few months they would encourage employees to submit ideas for improvement. Then they wouldn't implement any of the ideas and would blame the employees for having bad ideas. Okay, his boss's promotion to China was probably the company's way of saying, let's see how he messes up internationally now. Story 10. I used to work at Comcast and I wanted to move up into management. I was new to the corporate world, so I thought that helping my supervisor with her job would help me get promoted. But by helping, I mean she made me do her entire job. I ran her meetings, did scheduling, and went through her paperwork and more while she sat at her desk playing Candy Crush on her iPad. I did all this while also working on the phone with customers. I did this for months until one day I lost my temper with a customer. I take full responsibility for what I did, but that wasn't good enough for my supervisor. She sat me down and humiliated me in front of the upper management for an hour and a half. She made me listen to a recording of my mistake, pausing it every few minutes to say things like, "How could you?" I was in tears by the end, and she used that to show how bad of an employee I was and how good a boss she was for helping me learn from my mistakes. She then pushed for me to receive a final notice, which meant if I messed up again within a year, I'd lose my job. She wasn't going to fire me, she just wanted me to do it for her. HR and my friends in management were no help. Now that I had gone from being a rising star to an outcast, no one cared about me, except my supervisor, who still expected me to do her job. I spent the next few days crying a lot, but then I got furiously angry. I didn't quit or give up. Instead, I decided the best revenge would be to succeed. I went back to school to finish my degree. After a while, I was offered an internship, which I took. While I was struggling at Comcast for 40 hours a week, I was also doing an internship for 20 hours a week and being a full-time student. I made sure my supervisor knew this. "Sorry, boss," I'd say, "I can't do that report for you. I have a final to study for." "Want me to stay late?" "No, I can't. My internship is working me hard, so I want to spend my night off at home doing nothing." I basically ignored her whenever I could. If she asked me a question about my job, I'd respond, but if she sent out a group email about some incentive plan, I'd just delete it. At one point, she pulled me into a meeting that was really just me and her, where she antagonized me and kept saying, "You don't know me." That was really awkward. This went on for a year. I was on probation. During that time, I kept my sales numbers low, not so low that I'd get fired, but just low enough to show I wasn't trying. This affected my commission, but it was worth it. Why? 3 months before my probation was over, I had the chance to switch to another supervisor, which I did, happily. In those last 3 months, I worked harder and my new supervisor saw my sales numbers go up. I had intentionally held back my commission to make my old boss look bad. The upper management saw how my new supervisor succeeded in 1 month, where my old supervisor failed in 9, and it felt great to humiliate her like she had humiliated me. On the 1-year anniversary of my probation, I gave my 2-week notice. In my exit interview, I told them about my life improvements and that I spent the last year becoming a better person just to spite Comcast. I wanted to quit until after my probation was over. Story 11. I left my job because the management was really bad. Our division chief believed that if he and other managers didn't micromanage us, we wouldn't do our work. He was strongly against letting us work from home, even though our job could be done completely remotely. He only allowed us 1 day a week to work from home because the person above him made him do it. We worked in an area with very bad traffic, one of the worst in the country, so most people understand if employees are a few minutes late. But if we were even 1 minute late, we'd get a long lecture that took more time than the minute we were late. Here's the worst part. If we were late or took a longer lunch, we'd had to write on 3 different supervisors' Outlook calendars and our own when we planned to make up that time, even if it was just 5 minutes. For example, I emailed all my supervisors to ask if I could leave 4 hours early on a Friday because I was flying to a wedding. It was approved. So I wrote on all the Outlook calendars when I would make up that time, coming in 30 minutes early, staying 30 minutes late for 4 days before the trip. When I got on the plane, I got a panic call from a coworker saying that one of the supervisors was looking for me and had no idea I was going on a trip. I told him to tell her to check her calendar. I had already given my notice, so I didn't care if they got mad. If we got to work early, we weren't allowed to leave work early unless we had gotten it approved beforehand. They had a lot of employees quitting because of this. I think they relaxed the rules a little after I left, but not much. I wonder how they dealt with the situation and not being able to catch their employees checking personal email. Alright, if any of these stories got to you, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.